Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm your host Miss KK and this is The Wave. It is your weekly show that looks at topics related to personal, family and business finance, and our hope is that by the time you get to the end of these conversations, really you are better equipped to make sound financial decisions. So if you are new here, thank you very much for stopping by and welcome, and if you're already a returning subscriber, an awesome appreciation for always sticking by. Today I'm filming outside because it's extremely hot inside, so if you see or hear background noise or dogs barking, please excuse me, but I really can't just bear the heat inside. If I put on the fan, it just makes noise in the background as well, so please bear with me. This video also is going to be from an Oshiwambo context, so I'm going to be mixing a lot of Oshiwambo in English. So if you don't understand Oshiwambo, I will try and put subtitles, so alternatively you can pass this one because it is going to be primarily for my Oshiwambo fans. But also I've also mentioned and noticed that most of the African tribes have a lot of similarity, so what might happen in Oshiwambo could also be similar with what happens in your tribe, so you might also want to stick around from that perspective. Right. So why is building in the north a big deal, and why should we be doing it? For many of us, we grew up in extended families, meaning our parents are raising more than just your siblings. So you could be growing up with your aunties in the same house, with your cousins and also your siblings. And because of that, the sleeping arrangements generally tend to differ. So for some people, regardless of the gender, and then when the guys start growing up, and also it's also not your room alone. You're probably going to be sharing regardless of your age. Whereas for many other people, so you guys sleep in those separate rooms, but you also be sharing those rooms with your sisters and your cousins and your aunties. So as you grow old, it really becomes so the expectation is you should be in a position to build your own structure so that you can go and live comfortably there, and when you get married, hopefully someday, you can leave that room for your younger siblings and they can continue the cycles. That is really the setup in which most of us are raised in a Oshiwambo context, that necessitate building in the north. Also, it's just to improve the general living conditions at home. We also, as we earn more money, we ought to improve the things around the house, including to improve the situation, the sleeping arrangement. Like I've mentioned, normally we sleep in this room, it's congested, but if we have the means to build other rooms, to extend these rooms, it will actually be better. Plus, our parents spend a lot of time trying to raise many people, so their income levels are quite confined, and by the time they get to old ages, they no longer can afford to build because inflation has caught up and their income level hasn't increased. So us that are working now have now the responsibility to upgrade our houses. So really that's the context in which building is done in Northern Namibia. But there are other essentials that you also need to look around your house that you should consider when you start working. And it's a bit unfortunate because these things can really all go in your shoulder, and that's why it's important to prioritize kucha. And then you need to focus on these other things that are needed in your home. And the first thing that I want to really talk about here is water access to your homestead. Most of us live in households where through a community tap. For many villages, we are lucky in the sense that the government has brought access to water, whereby they at least brought a community tap, and most villagers were able to pull water from that community tap to their household. So you now need to assess how far is the community tap to your household, and is it something practical that your family needs to continue to fetch water from these community taps, or you would maybe want to consider investing in a few pipes and pulling that water to your homestead. Because let's face it, most of this water fetching issues falls on young girls in the house or young boys in the house. And they still need to study. So we need to see what is essential. So for many people, so the first thing I would do before I built, but I didn't have to do that because my brothers did it because they came before me. So they pulled on me so that it's easily accessible. And you realize it becomes easier because you can just get water from the tap straight to the kitchen instead of tamka kongo hauto tamkate komandini tamugeta megumbo tamudithondoroma end. Okay, the second thing that I would consider before I even consider building okanjo. So again, we grew up actually using bushes as ablution facilities, but I don't know how your village setting is, but for many village with deforestation and urbanization, etc., many people cut down trees, so most villages don't even have forest type trees anymore. So I would say makino tabi okutunga consider okutunga okanjogo, and it doesn't really cost a lot to build okanjogo, especially a pit latrine, not a flushing toilet, a pit latrine in the north. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and you can also build a semi-flushing toilet. Those toilets that are built, okatungwa kenepoto, but it doesn't link to the water system in the house, because the one thing that we face when we live in Northern Namibia is a pressure water issue. So most of the time the water comes from far, that it comes at a low pressure. So unless you've installed a tank, then to flush that toilet using water straight from that tap might not be practical. So what people normally do is put a mini tank there that is filled, and the water flushes from the tank to the pot, and that's how the bathroom is used. Or alternatively, you can just put up a pot and people brings a 5-liter bucket, and every time they use the bathroom they pour the water onto the toilet, and then you flush your toilet manually. So I would consider that before I even start considering building. And lastly, two things I would also consider before I get into the midst of building is solar lights at your house. Yes, we know that most of our houses are far from the NORAD electricity grid. To pull electricity is quite expensive, and for some odd reason I actually think the amount of money that we spend is not worth the return that we're going to make on that investment per se, because it's normally just used for cooking. And if you pull electricity in a household where you are the sole breadwinner, or spending and it also becomes your problem for you to buy the units for people to use. So I would say, because of if you can't afford to pull the electricity, then consider installing solar lights. Solar lights are quite cheap, and they tend to last longer, and you don't need a lot of solar light. And maybe you can pull a few bulbs in their rooms. So that way the kids can still also study, and also it cuts the use of buying candles and using paraffin, and those things are hazardous, especially they buy paraffin, and as well as they are dangerous, especially they buy candles. When you are studying it, because the person will use a candle, they will sleep in the room, will catch fire, etc. So I would consider investing in solar light if I am starting to upgrade our house at the moment. All right, and lastly, yes, a lot of us can't afford to buy the stoves, but you can afford to buy a cylinder no sigambuya aurongo mbuya o cylinder and not the stove itself, but I'll try and put up a picture. My one friend is actually using it in Barbados, and it's actually really cool that she uses it in the town settings, because I've normally only seen it in village settings. So the reason why a gas stove becomes essential, especially where it's raining and the people need to cook, even so what we did was we bought that small stove, and we bought a cylinder high filling up, then my mom keeps the cylinder filled up, and it's only used in case and to that container, and no one needs to endure the heat, because let's face it, on tenya so okuza mepsa aro kandi natango toka hapo masiga to imbobo, it just a lot of work. So on those special occasions where there's really no time to sort out dinner, or it's raining and people need to make, you can use the gas cylinder to make the meals. So it's not critical, but it will better the life of the people that are responsible for the food making. Yes, because I'm with no care of how the food came about, but do consider how the process of making the food goes when deciding whether this is something that you ought to invest in or not. Right, so assuming you've gotten some of those things out of the way now, how do you start the building process? Again, here it would depend on your household and who came before you, because remember, I always tell people where you are in the lineage would determine how much you need to do in terms of black tax and in terms of just traditional responsibility in general. And building, for some people, they classify it in the category of black tax because they feel like other people don't have to do it, or they have to do more than their counterparts. So unfortunately, it is what it is, and we just need to do with what we are blessed with. Okay, so I would generally categorize building into a few things. So the first thing that I think people ought to start with, or can consider starting with, which doesn't cost a lot of money, is a boundary wall of your house. Remember, most of our households in the north are built with sticks, and unless your village is blessed with a forest where people can replace those sticks every year, it might become actually a costly venture. For example, komara kuna shomithitu omagumbogeto hagatungwa ni henguti, and henguti, it needs to be replaced every single year, and it just becomes costly. Ovurodhonu ya diroko unovurina irokande umbotariwu, then you have ihenguti yathikamana ampeaka pewa hokorwa. And sometimes during the rainy seasons, when the girls are struggling to really get something to make the fire, they can take those ihenguti mongajo tekaya in the premise that next year we're going to replace the things, and if it doesn't happen, the house doesn't look nice. So you could look for a permanent solution and rather build a boundary wall for your house with bricks. So what I would generally do if I was starting off and our house didn't have a boundary wall, I would consider building it in stages. You don't have to complete the entire project in 1 year. The only problem with young professional, but let's now also think about it, they didn't come overnight. Onto kwe taturapunga joy kuma yo yiti tatungupondu daime, and year by year they add a structure to it. That's how maumbo hagathikama tamu kunomiti tamuetomea tamutokanjuo, and eventually it becomes a complete homestead. So in your attempt to try and improve your household, you also need to do it in stages, because that's the only way it's going to be economically viable for you to complete that project, especially if you have limited resources. So building in stages of boundary wall could just be you do this corner this year, that corner next year, that corner next year, and that corner the after. And obviously, it will look awkward, but that's what things look when they're in progress. And I'll generally start with the front of the house, maybe complete the two corners, or even if some people can see, it doesn't really bother, and you do it over time. And that will save you a lot of time instead of you just trying to save, because in the process of saving, your money also loses value, or some instead of you just buying bricks, getting it started, buying bricks, continuing it until the process is actually finished. And number 2, before you start building your own room, I would say consider the condition of the kitchen that you guys are cooking in. Yes, a lot of us are the only issue that I have is on problem problem, because now in out of and it runs the risk etc. So I would look at the condition of our room, and then I'll assess whether we have enough thatch to keep replacing it, or we should maybe consider upgrading it. And it becomes really good, because so you guys are guaranteed etc. So I would look at Gondudakupungura in condition perhaps consider ukatara when the girls are cooking. Mundudawu yo hozo muana kuterekera ashiko problem ango vuta iroko omehagazirire moha donduda nenge mundudo yatungwa na moha ashike kamnashoma kende gawana gutatereke mota siremorith. So also just consider those things, because those are the very reason why people stay in the village. If life is uncomfortable in the village, then you expect all your cousins that are not working to flock to town and cities, and then they come and live in an informal settlement, and life in the village could be better off for them as opposed to them living in the informal settlement. And then I would also consider upgrading my parents' rooms if it's necessary before I build my own room. Or what you normally can do is, especially if you are a lady, you can build a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom for your mother, and then if you don't want now to come back from town to your cousin and the young ones, you can share a room with your mother for a year whilst you're still saving up to build your own room. And when we're saying build your parents a room, we're not saying build an expensive structure. For many of our parents, we really just need to build them a 1-bedroom extra room setting here, just for them to host their friends or for them to also have space, because most of them don't even have a lot of things, so a 1-bedroom would do. But I would always say a 1-bedroom plus or setishashi if there's an event in that house, and instead of the people coming straight into your mother's room, and she still has privacy. And most of the time, because our houses in any case don't have plumbing, you don't have to build your mother's room with a shower inside. You can still just upgrade and maybe all you need to do is, for a lot of them, is just put flooring instead of there's at least a cement, and they can step on the cement when they are bathing. And lastly, you then can start considering your room. I'm doing it because if you do it like this, people tend to appreciate that, we can see progress around the house, and we can see, things are improving since she started working, and you think you've finished. People sometimes still expect a lot more from you. And when people are already seeing the effort you are making around the house, they also tend to be slightly lighter on you when it comes to their money requests, because they can already see that you are doing a lot around the house. And what I also normally say is start this process early in your career, because that's when you make the least amount of money. If you don't have a lot of money, people don't expect a lot from you. People have this mentality, so she can afford to build slightly larger, so they start putting this unnecessary pressure on you. All right. So with that being said, now let's look at, assuming you've done what you can, and I'm not saying all the things that I've discussed before you need to do all by yourself. Some of them can be done by you, some of them can be done by your siblings, some of them can be done by your cousins that are coming after you, but you need to be having thought of it so that you know that there's a structure in place. For example, my brother then pulled on me. The one did boundary wall, I did my mother's room, and then I actually did my own room, and then my brother did the solar light, etc., etc. So it doesn't mean all of these things that needs to fall on you. And if you are all siblings that are working, we must try to pull all our weight, because if you guys think you're just in town enjoying your money, you are actually otodia when you're nyaro, because now others are carrying weight that could be shared between the 2 of you guys or the 3 of you guys, but you choose to be ignorant about these things. When it comes to building your own room now, I always look at it from 2 perspectives. It's mainly, for example, for guys, you build and you're going to stay in your room for a long time, and potentially if you get married, you're going to stay in that room with your wife to be, and you guys are gonna stay there for a few years before eventually going to move out and going to make a house of your own. So you need to also think about it so that you are not forced to build twice, because most of you guys start off work and you build the smallest structure available. When you are about to get married, you actually realize that this structure is too small. If I come and there's no space for anything anymore. Now we are forced to upgrade that room immediately after getting married. So there is no money left after the wedding, so for there to be pressure for us to start extending that room immediately becomes also costly and unnecessary. So when you are building, think about it practically. Not we are saying that you should. If you can, try and build a room that is slightly bigger in Nagano Kaseti, so that you are not forced to actually forced to extend immediately after marriage. The dogs in the streets are really loud, so I hope you can still hear me. So the second aspect that you need to look at is whether you are building to leave. Building to leave is now a lady a few months before you leave. So if you are building like that, consider doing the bare minimum, especially around the house. Let's say boundary wall, so there's no guilt in you doing the bare minimum, because so you should consider doing on the diary very basic, but also consider what you're going to do with that room after you leave. So for many families, shower kokana mundu doazamo otamoya kweni, but for other families they consider kuchaya ndudi haigonjapo immediately. When you get married, you'll still be frequently coming back home to visit, and when you come and visit, you'll have that place to sleep. All right, while we're wrapping up here, I want us to consider other things that perhaps can be excluded from building in the north. Number one, indoor showers and indoor bathroom. Like I've mentioned, shower the many. Consider just building a normal shower outside, especially in Gotamutungo Munjime Wumbo. Then you can share that bathroom outside, and then everyone can use it, and just for as long as it's kept clean, that is good to go, because that will cut your cost significantly. But if you are building in a house where everyone has a shower in their room and a bathroom in their room, it will become impractical for you not to build that, because it will be inconvenient for you, because you are going to be showering in other people's rooms. Building cupboards versus just buying a cupboard from a Chinatown or from a not Fenmat and the likes, whichever is cheaper, but build-it cupboards quite costly and they cannot be moved around. So if you want to then give that to your parents when you leave, then the thing is stuck in your room and they can't. And sometimes we build these things and we say, but you're not realizing the position of that room. Most of us are now building konkara. Are your parents really going to sleep konkara? So that is also one thing that you need to look at it realistically. And things like ceilings and geysers and all of that, it really depends on the quality or the standards that your house is built. For many of us, these are not necessary. The use of tiles can be really expensive, especially if you're building on low budget. The alternative to tiles is flooring your cement and shining it so that it's slippery, or you use utapeta. I don't know what utapeta shige mashingiriza. I just know my sister used them in her room. And if you keep your room neat, is as good as your room having tiles. So consider that as an alternative. And lastly, the use of a small brick versus a big brick. I don't know what this fuss is about, but small bricks are expensive compared to bigger bricks. So I would say, if you can, rather use the big bricks, because that will save you significantly tons of money. So those are some of the practical considerations that I wanted to chat through regarding building in the north. But when it comes to finances now, I wouldn't suggest you take a personal loan or a loan from the bank to build a house in the north. Just be patient, and it's just not worth the interest rate. And for many of us, we want to have things standing overnight. So what I would normally do is save, tandirando lopi, save, tandirando samende etungota retamek, save, torandi ipirangi, save, torandi pereki on the taipata, save, torando makende, save, torando tiles. So you don't have to have it all together before you can start building, because the longer you wait, the more things get expensive and the more responsibility comes up. Otoninga shwa ongrama mnyongondatu kukugoya kulisaka ndenyo shikeza shwa ongrama 15 nayo hango yangadi ya pitikorane nyongo. So if you are waiting to save and have it all together before you start building, in other words, you will never start. So really, that's all I wanted to say in this video. Please let us know in the comment section what tips or advice you have for people that are currently building or that are considering building. And lastly, please, building because your finances will be significantly constrained and you are just adding or stressor unnecessary. So start as soon as you can, and start while you can, and start with what you have whilst you accumulating more. Apologies for dogs barking in the background, but I really just needed to do this video outside because it's really hot inside. Other than that, that's all I had from this video today. Thank you very much, and until next time, it is goodbye.